Let us gather our hearts in our hopes for peace. Please listen to our gathering music, Do What the Spirit Say Do by Sweet Honey and the Rock.
Well, that was wonderful. I love Sweet Honey and the Rock, so that was a great way to start it. Good morning and welcome to Granite Peak Unitarian Universalist Congregation in Prescott, Arizona. I'm Kelsey Wilkes, your worship associate today. We extend a warm welcome to all and glad you were able to join us, and we hope you're in good health. We want to stay connected, so please join us for breakout rooms after the service. This will give you time to chat with congregants in small groups. Our guest speaker, Reverend Becky Gunn, will remain in the main room after the service for greetings and discussions of her message. If you're joining us for the first time, please check out our website for more information about us, prescottuu.org. This is the mission statement of our congregation. We are a compassionate spiritual community that celebrates diversity, nurtures the personal and spiritual growth of all ages, shares our gifts, promotes justice for all, and serves the world we live in. During the month of July, our minister, the Reverend Patty Willis, is on a month-long soul-searching, renewing pilgrimage, and we are wishing for her a fulfilling journey. Guest speakers are filling our pulpit until she returns on August 8th. We extend our thanks to all who contribute to the presentation of our service today. Heather Knowles for technical direction, the Granite Peak worship team and choir, and we welcome back our guest speaker, Reverend Becky Gunn. After a 30-year career in business, Reverend Gunn chose to go to Star King School of the Ministry to become a UU ministry. She did her internship in Albany, New York, an interim ministry in Boulder, Colorado, and her called ministry for 6 years in Bangor, Maine, where she became Minister Emerita in 2014. Her focus in ministry was spiritual growth associated with social justice. She's a great fit for us here in Prescott. She retired here in 2015, and I've known Becky since 2017 when I joined AAUW. I'm thrilled to have her back with us today. She's a joy to work with. Whether you are newcomers, friends, or longtime members, we appreciate that you've chosen to join us on this Midsummer Sunday. If you have unanswered questions about who we are, please check out our website at prescottuu.org and check out the order of service for information on Granite Peak's Zoom meetings happening throughout the week. The current food pantry is fully stocked as needed at this time, and we will be working on reopening it as we look at how to reopen the sanctuary. There's also information about the Social Justice Coordinator's position, which will be closing next week. Our Children's Faith Development Program remains active this summer each Sunday at 10 a.m. in the Faith Development Building, in the garden, where they can see what the monsoon rains have brought under the guidance of Bev Bostrom and Robert Shegog. Additional announcements can be found in the weekly peak on our website and, as I said, in today's order of service. We open this morning's service by reading Granite Peak's mission statement. We are a compassionate spiritual community that celebrates diversity, nurtures the personal and spiritual growth of all ages, shares our gifts, promotes justice for all, and serves the world we live in. We light the chalice today pondering the words of Mary Oliver from her poem, The Journey. One day you finally knew what you had to do and began, though the voices around you kept shouting their bad advice. Though the whole house began to tremble and you felt the old tug at your ankles. Mend my life, each voice cried, but you didn't stop. You knew what you had to do, though the wind pried with its stiff fingers at the very foundations. Though their melancholy was terrible, it was already late enough and the wild night and the road full of fallen branches and stones. But little by little, as you left their voices behind, the stars began to burn through the sheets of clouds, and there was a new voice, which you slowly recognized as your own, that kept you company as you strode deeper and deeper into the world, determined to do the only thing you could do, determined to save the only life you could save. As we light this chalice, let us recognize the courage and fortitude of our first women ministers who were determined to become who they were called to be.
Our words of gathering this morning are from Marge Piercy. The people I love the best jump into work head first without dallying in the shallows, and swim with sure strokes almost out of sight. They seem to become natives of that element. The black, sleek heads of seals bouncing like half-submerged balls. I love people who harness themselves as an ox to a heavy cart, who pull like water buffalo with massive patience, who strain in the mud and the muck to move things forward, who do what has to be done again and again. I want to be with the people who submerge themselves in the task, who go into fields to harvest and work in a row and pass the bags along, who are not parlor generals and field deserters, but move in a common rhythm when the food must come in or the fire be put out. The work of the world is as common as mud. Botched, it smears the hands, crumbles to dust. But the thing worth doing well has a shape that is satisfied, clean, and evident. Greek amphoras for wine or oil, Hopi vases that held corn are put in museums, but you know they were made to be used. The pitcher cries for water to carry and a person for work that is real. Today, we will be considering women of the 1870s who felt the call to ministry. We all know that that work is real. They resisted a system that told them that they were not fit for the call of the Spirit. They persisted and became among the first ordained women in the United States. Please join in singing our first hymn, which is number 131, Love Will Guide Us, by some people I think you will know.
Love will guide us, peace has followed us, hope inside us, to lead the way on the road from free to living. Love will guide us.
And now join me in saying the words to our covenant. Love is the doctrine of this congregation. The quest for truth its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve others in community. Thus do we covenant together.
For our joys and concerns today, we will ring our chime 3 times. Our first is in memory of those who have gone before us, those who have lit our way through their strength. The second is for those of us here today searching for deeper meaning in our journey together. The third is for all those who continue to carry on the light of our faith community through vision, resolve, and love. Please sing these words of comfort.
Walking with you is my prayer.
As we listen to this musical interlude, take a moment to embrace the feeling of connection and community that we have when we gather each week. Let us remember that this congregation and its programs are supported by your generosity. For our offertory, we also give back to the greater community through our Seeds of Support program. Our July recipient organization is GYCC. They are our local LGBTQ plus support organization, but we're not allowed by the powers that be to have that in the title of their organization. You can read about them in the order of service. To give during this distance time, please go to prescottuu.org. On the bottom left-hand side, click the word donate to contribute. The link is also available in the chat. What is given in love is received in gratitude. Blessed be.
There is more love somewhere. There is more love somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more love somewhere. There is more hope somewhere. There is more hope somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more hope somewhere. There is more peace somewhere. There is more peace somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more peace somewhere. There is more joy somewhere. There is more joy somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find
And now a reading, A Psalm of Freedom by Marian Therese Winter. Liberate us, free spirit, from all that hold us captive within us. Call us into freedom, freedom to be and become and belong, freedom to stand and admit we were wrong, freedom to see and to say what we know, freedom to fail and freedom to grow, freedom to feel and be grateful for feeling, freedom to heal and to help with our healing, freedom to laugh and freedom to cry, and perhaps above all, the freedom to try. Free us, liberating spirit, from all that holds us captive around us. Give to us freedom, freedom from systems that do not include us, freedom from structures that do not support us, freedoms from practices meant to enslave us, freedom from rules that exist to deny us, freedom from values that only destroy us, freedom from people who refuse to affirm us, freedom from guilt around and within us, freedom from fear and its power to deter us. Empower us, Spirit power, for prophetic use of our freedom. Freedom for freeing women to be, freedom for setting all people free, freedom for finding the best way to pray and for coming to God in our unique way, freedom for making courageous decisions to live by the justice the Spirit envisions, freedom to assuring the climate is free for you to be you and for me to be me. Come, Spirit of freedom, come, set us free. And now listen to our musical interlude, Building a New Way.
We are building a new way. We are building a new way. We are building a new way, feeling stronger every day. We are building a new way. We can feed our every need. Every need. We can feed our every need. Every need. We can feed our every need. Start with love, that is the seed. We can feed our every need. Peace and freedom is our cry. Peace and freedom is our cry. Peace and freedom is our cry. Without these, our world will die. Peace and freedom is our cry. We are building a new way. We are building a new way. We are building a new way, feeling stronger every day.
Today's topic deals with women, specifically women in ministry. Over the last 30 years, ministry has become diverse, more so than ever before. We now have openly gay, bisexual, transgender ministers, and now we have a majority. That is, a majority of women now make up the fellowship ministers in the Unitarian Universalist Association. This is a change not only in who stands in the pulpit each Sunday, but how ministry and its authority are perceived. There is far less patriarchy, for one thing. Nevertheless, there are still remnants of the old system, the good old boy network. Women do not tend to be called to large churches. There are some, however, but the glass ceiling is still there for most female ministers. We are paid less in general because we are called to smaller churches, but our seminary debt and our living expenses and our commitment in terms of time and energy is just as significant as for men. And it is quite common for women to have less authority in congregations than their male counterparts. For those of you familiar with the New Testament and the letters of Paul, you know that Paul didn't exactly support the concept of women in leadership in churches. He basically gave women instructions something like, be quiet, listen to your male superiors, and be good wives. This, of course, is an oversimplification, but the reality is that for almost 2,000 years, the church did not allow women to participate in leadership or ministry because of what Paul said. It was forbidden for women to preach or be anything but helpmates for their husbands or fathers. Those who dared to express themselves publicly were often called witches and treated harshly for their courage to speak their truth. I have the sense that women did not always appreciate this role. And remember, women did not write the history, so their point of view was seldom, if ever, considered relevant, much less worthy of being called history. In the mid to late 1800s, there was what was called the cult of domesticity. It was considered, at least by men, to be a cult that reflected true womanhood. The cult's perspective was that women had 4 traits. They were inclined toward domesticity. Second, they had piety. They had submissiveness and purity. Men, on the other hand, had 4 characteristics: competitiveness, secularism, dominance, and last but most importantly, rationality. Hence, given this cultural paradigm, you can see that women were not suited to be ministers, nor could they be considered capable of being ministers. The hold of this model culturally is still somewhat evident today, while not necessarily expressed so explicitly. The women who struggled to break their hold culture had on them to become ministers were motivated, capable, persistent, and definitely not submissive. I will be speaking specifically today of 2 women who became models and mentors of the Iowa Sisterhood and the larger Prophetic Sisterhood. There were over 70 ministers that were influenced by Mary Safford and Eleanor Gordon. In 1851, Mary Augusta Safford was born in Hamilton, Illinois, on a farm. By the time she was 28, she was a minister in a pulpit. She was the core of the actualization of the dream women had of fulfilling what had been a male bastion, ministry. This was not the role that her mother would have chosen for her. Louisa Stafford, Mary's mother, had been raised with the expectation that a woman's nature was not suited to the rigors both physical and intellectual, required of a minister. If a woman were to have a role in church, it was to work in the kitchen and to pray in the pews. Mary's father might not have wanted her to be a minister, but when he died in 1860, he was a full-blown religious radical. He did not believe in the infallibility of the Bible. He was an abolitionist, and he was a proponent of Darwinism. And he was called before his church board many a time. Mary inherited her father's curiosity and his radical views. She believed in what was then called ethical Christianity, that works were more important than words. From a very young age, she preached to her younger siblings and friends and declared, "I will become a minister." She did so against great odds. She was never able to get to seminary. She had to help on her farm after the death of her father, and this family simply did not have the funds. She was nevertheless a scholar. She taught herself through reading voraciously. Our second woman, Eleanor Gordon, was also involved in ministry at a young age. She was also from Hamilton, Illinois, and was great friends with Mary Safford. She held the same religious views, radically religious views, as her friend, and made a pact with Mary when she was in her early 20s that she would be in ministry as well. She became a teacher in the local schools and eventually became a principal. In all likelihood, neither Mary nor Eleanor would have become ministers without the help of a mentor. And in this case, the mentor was Reverend Oscar Clute. He was a Unitarian minister and arrived in Keokuk, Iowa, just across the Mississippi River from Hamilton in 1874. He gave a series of lectures in Hamilton and became acquainted with Mary and Eleanor. Listening to them both, hearing Mary speak at some events, even preaching on occasion, he encouraged them to start their own church in Hamilton. By 1879, they began to plan how they would start their church. They had the support of Jenkin Lloyd Jones, the Unitarian Western Secretary. In part, his support was a result of realism. It was clear that most new churches, or even existing ones, did not have sufficient funds to pay for male ministers. Male ministers were expected to earn $800 to $2,000 a year. Women would work, and in fact did work, for much less. Erudite men also did not find the frontier an amenable place to work. It seems that churchgoers on the frontier did not want scholarly sermons, but instead they preferred down-to-earth topics. Mary, who was the consummate organizer and an excellent speaker, took the lead role in forming the church. Eleanor would be her assistant for many years to come, a role she thought appropriate as she did not feel she would be good in the pulpit. And she continued to be the principal in the local school, which was very important in that they needed the money. Mary earned less than $40 a month. Eleanor made a bit more, and so they lived a Spartan lifestyle, but they thrived. The initial attendance was good, but after a few months, 150 were attending and sometimes over 200. They also started a series of lectures and plays in the evening. Soon, Jones encouraged Mary to fill the pulpit in Humboldt, Iowa, a church that was then without a minister, but was also in the process of building a new church, a simple, functional church. Sorry. And not one with a high pulpit and Gothic architecture. Mary would preach 2 Sundays in Hamilton and 2 in Humboldt. Soon it became apparent that their future was in Humboldt. Mary and Eleanor moved there, where Eleanor was again hired as a principal. It was in Humboldt where Mary was ordained. It was not long before the pews were filled to overflowing. Now, Eleanor's role was to create a Sunday school for the children, and she was also involved in the music. She wrote many of the hymns to correspond with the ethical religion that they preached and taught. There was no creed, and their approach was based on their theme: freedom, fellowship, and character in religion. Again, works, not words. Mary and Eleanor were role models as well as mentors. They took in young women and helped them become ministers. They served many churches and were successful for many years. They, however, were resistant to hierarchy and did not want to be dependent upon the Unitarian Association. Only once in Mary's career did she accept funds from the association. She did not want to be told how to run a church, nor what theology to preach. She had an acerbic relationship with Boston, in particular with their theological scholarship, which avoided this concept of good works. She attended a meeting once in Boston, where she was treated with disdain. Clearly, a woman could not be a good minister. That experience confirmed her less than positive opinion of Boston. But power being resident in Boston ultimately meant the demise of the ministries of most of the women who were part of what came to be called the Prophetic Sisterhood. In 1870, only 5 women were ministers. By the late 1880s, there were 70 women. In the Midwest, or then the frontier, there were 20 women who had been influenced by Mary and Eleanor, and they comprised what is now called the Iowa Sisterhood, although their ministries were in a wide array of states: Wisconsin, Nebraska, South Dakota, Missouri, Colorado, Iowa, and Illinois among them. Of the 70 women ministers, only 3 continued in ministry after the turn of the century. Most continued to work for the good of the society through non-religious means, such as settlement houses or working for the women's suffrage movement. Did you know that Harvard would not accept women in the 19th century? Its seminary was a bastion of orthodoxy and strongly denigrated women in ministry. And they, writing the history of Unitarian ministry, left out the women, particularly those of the frontier. These women were largely forgotten, even in Iowa, until by chance in 1973, in Memphis, Tennessee, in the archives, a local minister found a memoir of one of the sisterhood, and a research project was born, the result of which is the book from which I have formulated this sermon, The Prophetic Sisterhood by Cynthia Grant Tucker. These women did, to some degree, influence how modern ministry is performed, raising the awareness that ministry may be impacted by location as well as theology. The old form of ministry was in large part not pastoral. It was focused on the intellectual long sermon. Preaching was one element of the ministry of the sisterhood, but they focused more on the practical, the way to live an ethical life, and the creation of a church family. And while many ministers today are intellectual, there is more focus on how we are all interrelated and on how we are a human family. Our time today is too short to discuss all of these women in detail. I've only lightly touched on Safford and Gordon. They all rejected orthodoxy and patriarchy. Most remained single, believing that fostering a church family would do short shrift to their own family. Some were able to get a bachelor's of divinity from Meadville. Most were eventually ordained, even if they had no formal education. Most earned significantly less than men, and friendships were crucial to them, and most formed lifelong friendships. They believed that they were suited to ministry, and if there were a universal salvation, then it was logical that all were equal, even women. We have lessons to learn from these incredible women. Some said they showed us how to grow the roots of resilience. They were isolated, they were minimized, they were on the whole poor, but they were committed to their calling. Just how many of us would risk societal and religious ostracism and then do it anyway, regardless of the consequences? To evoke the courage, the commitment, and the love of the Prophetic Sisterhood, in particular the Iowa Sisterhood, let us honor those women by joining in saying their names as I read them. Florence Buck, Mary Edith Colson, Caroline Julia Bartlett Crane, Adele Fuchs, Eleanor Elizabeth Gordon, Marie Howe, Ida Hulton, Mary L. Leggett, Rowena Morris Mann, Mila Maynard, Amelia Murdoch Wing, Marion Murdoch, Anna Jane Norris, Margaret Olmsted, Estelle Elizabeth Padham, Gertrude von Petzold, Helen Grace Putnam, Mary Augusta Safford, Eliza Wilkes, Helen Wilson, Celia Woolley. Our music today has been a reflection of the women who blazed ministerial trails, their willingness to do as the Spirit say do, the love that guided them, where they found more love, where they sought freedom, how they built a new way, and how they chose life, hope, truth, and love. These women had been forgotten, but now they're known. Let us remember these women, their sacrifice, their commitment, and their radical theologies. Blessed be, namaste, asante, shalom, peace, and love. Please join in singing our closing hymn, number 6, Just as Long as I Have Breath.
Just as long as I have breath, I must answer yes to life.
These are words from one of the Prophetic Sisterhood, Reverend Ada C. Bowles. Rise up, O woman, no longer sit at ease. The banner of thy freedom is lifting to the breeze. Be ready for the morning that breaks the long dark night. Up, ignorance and bondage, and hail the coming right.
Please join me in saying the words on the screen as Heather places them there. This is our extinguished chalice, our chalice extinguishing. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Thank you so much, Reverend Becky, for this message and reminder of the history and the power of women to persist and seek goals that do not conform to the dominant religious culture. I now invite you to take as much time as you wish to visit with your friends and with visitors in our chat room. You can stay online to be put into a chat room, or you can remain right here in the main Zoom room for a discussion with our guest, Reverend Becky. Our worship time has ended, and now our service begins. Dare to go bravely forward in our continued support for a just and free world. Stay healthy and be safe. So may it be.